All right, thank you both for coming in and sitting down with us. Let's start with the Tucson city elections. Regina Romero won. We all know that. She will be the next mayor. But Ed Ackerley, the independent, did pretty well, got almost 40% of the vote. Were either of you surprised by that?
I wasn't. Matter of fact, went into this thinking that he had a very clear shot to win. It was aided by the fact that the Republican Party, didn't run a mayoral candidate because at that point in time on the calendar, we would have had to run a write-in, which would have been probably not a good choice. So we subtly, and behind the scenes, worked very hard to get Republicans to vote for Ed, and I think they did. Obviously, he came close, and I think there was a path to victory.
Allison, were you surprised by how well Mr. Ackerley did?
We weren't surprised either, actually, and we never let our guard down. We were chasing ballots till the very last minute. I was watching the daily numbers of ballots that were coming in, because we were shooting to get at least 50% of the ballots from Democrats. And if we could do that, we felt like we would win. And we started out behind and caught up as the ballots started coming in. We knew that Republicans would probably support Mr. Ackerley and that he would get a chunk of the independents, who are a big part of our electorate here in Tucson. So it was not surprising, and the Regina Romero campaign worked very hard till the last minute.
David, any disappointment from the Pima GOP seeing how well Mr. Ackerley did that you all didn't end up running a candidate?
No, not at all, because as I said, the strategy was to not split the anti-Romero vote. If we had put a candidate in, even as a write-in, whatever votes that person got would just be votes that could have gone to Ed and would have reduced his total. And so to split the vote against Romero was not a strategy, we felt, and certainly Ed. With Ed's name is well known around the community, and he's a great guy and had the right views on what Tucson needs, we felt. And so just putting up a candidate to split that vote that would not probably have done as well as Ed anyway because of the write-in situation just didn't seem to be the right strategy. And I think it was the right strategy. I think that's our participation in his race was what got him as close as he came.
Allison, looking back at the city election, the Democrats swept the mayor and the 3 city council seats. Is this a hint of things to come in 2020, or is this just normal Tucson city politics?
I think it's both, actually. We are working hard toward 2020. We know that in Pima County, Democrat voter registrations are outpacing independent and Republican voter registrations. We are a Democratic city, as David points out, so it was our expectation that we would win. We didn't take anything for granted. But going forward, there is no way we are going to let up. We are going to continue to work hard.
What's the strategy for 2020 for Pima GOP? Well, we are going to be looking for 2020, we'll be looking at our state legislative races. We have almost all the slates filled at this point for the LD's legislative districts in Pima County for 1 senator, of course, and 2 House representatives. So we are working to get candidates. We've got, as I said, almost all LDs filled with candidates. We have a very vigorous primary ahead of us in the Congressional District 2 and 3. And we look to eventually wind up with a very strong candidate to challenge Ann Kirkpatrick and Raul Grijalva. And so we're working hard. As soon as the election was over, you turn the page and you're on to 2020. And we're looking forward to that. As Allison said, and I've said in this forum and others, we are outnumbered in Tucson 2-1. It's always a challenge in the county too. I mean, we're outnumbered in the county as well, not 2-1, but we're outnumbered, and so it's a challenge, and we'll be accepting it and doing exactly what Allison did. We chased ballots all the way up to and including through the all-day election day, and worked very hard to get those ballots in, and we'll continue to do that.
The two parties came down on opposite sides on Prop 205, the Sanctuary City Initiative. David, it went down strong. Mm-hmm. Were you surprised how strong it went down?
Well, I think there was a bit of a surprise there that it was that strong. I mean, I had been saying leading up to the election day that I thought it would be close. You know, there were lots of competing factors in terms of various positions for and against, different constituencies for and against. You had all of the elected Democrats and all of the candidate Democrats against it, yet the executive committee of the Democrat Party was for it. That was an interesting dynamic. The Republicans were very much against it. All the business interests in Tucson and civic groups and things like that were all against it. So you had competing dynamics, and I thought it would be a bit closer. And obviously I was happy with the margin of defeat. To me, it showed that Tucson voters really understood that issue, got past the rhetoric, and really understood what it would have meant to Tucson in terms of adverse conditions for future growth, and they voted against it.
Allison, lots of attention on Prop 205, mostly against it from the governor's office and even further outside Tucson. Was it a winnable proposition?
You know, I was never really comfortable predicting how 205 would go. I know my executive committee voted to support it. It did turn out to be a very complex question. Most people are not legal scholars. Most voters are not legal scholars. And there were opinions on both sides from experts that it would either not withstand a challenge or that it would. And because most voters aren't legal scholars, I believe what happened is they decided to stick with the status quo because that's what they know. That's my guess about the dynamic that happened this time around. We do have a plan B as Democrats, and it is to take the state legislature in 2020 and overturn SB 1070, what remains of it.
I know the undervote on Prop 205 Sanctuary City was 5-6%. I talked to some elections folks, and they said that's a great number. If we have judges, for example, they'd be happy to have only a 5 or 6%
Sure.
undervote. So a lot of people were interested in this and didn't skip the question either.
No.
Yeah,
No.
but it was a very complicated question.
Oh, it was a complicated issue. I'll agree with that. It was very complicated, and the Democrats and the pro forces tied it to SB 1070, which I never thought was appropriate. I never thought there was a link there. It was a pretty much standalone issue, and it was a bad one, and the voters recognized that.
David, you, following the election, followed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice alleging that postal workers weren't delivering some City of Tucson Republican ballots. What proof do you have on that?
Well, I didn't allege that. What I said was that there was a possibility of that the disclosure of party registration, it was done via putting party registration on the affidavit envelope, which was then inserted in a mail-out envelope that had a window in it, a cut window, that would then reveal party registration through that mail-out envelope. And what I did prior to the election, actually quite in advance of the election, was state that this opened up a series of problems that could happen. And there was no reason to do that, to create a situation that could lead to vote suppression or nefarious deeds. The affidavit envelope, once it was removed from the mail-out envelope, travels all throughout a tabulation and verification process and signature verification. and all sorts of processes. And anyone in those processes, I stated, had the opportunity to make ballots disappear. Then there was the issue of the party preference being exposed during the mailing process. That would have created an opportunity for employees of the Postal Service, Democrats not wanting a Republican vote cast, or Republicans not wanting Democrat votes cast, to at the point of actually delivering those to mailboxes, just not put them in. I am not alleging and hadn't alleged that that happened. There was some circumstantial evidence on Election Day, though, that indicated it might have happened. And it was on the east side, where the Republicans are, and at the voting location at Udall Center. There were so many people that swamped that center, having not received their ballots, and asking for replacement ballots, that location ran out of spare affidavit envelopes. The city clerk had to deliver more late in the evening. So those in line at 7 o'clock, which was a very long line, didn't get to vote until after 8 o'clock. So that creates, I think, some speculation. Why this overrun of people that didn't get their ballots on the east side where the Republicans are? Why there? Why not uniform across the city? All declaring quite fervently that they didn't get their ballot, and creating this kind of a crush at the Udall Center, and having not being able to cast their vote till after 8. So I think that is some circumstantial evidence that there might have been some ballots not delivered intentionally. And actually, the U.S. Postal Service is interested in that claim. I'm working with their office out of Denver, and they're going to look into that and see if there's any basis for concern.
When we talked to the Postal Service, they very strongly denied that any of their mail carriers, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, whatever, would ever do that. Do you believe that claim?
Oh, I believe that they believe it. And I think they do believe that they believe it. And as I understand it, the local postal inspector said that it's impossible to do that because of the barcode reading that goes on with mail all throughout the process. I agree that mail all throughout the process, they do bar scans all the way through, and they know where all the mail is. But they don't know, at the very end of the day, they don't know that your local mailman, after the final bar scan, doesn't just keep it in the truck and not deliver it to the house, because there are no bar scans on your mailbox. I believe they believe that. I'm not saying anybody's not telling the truth. I just think that there's a hole in this system, and Roger Randolph has indicated in a letter to me that they will be seriously looking at not divulging those party preferences in the next election, and they should not.
Allison, let me turn to you on this. Any concerns of voter suppression this way from the Democratic side?
Well, we are always in favor of an electoral system with integrity and everything that goes along with that. So although we do not think that there was anything nefarious that actually happened, David's pointing out possibilities. There's no proof that actually any ballots were tampered with or not delivered. So from that standpoint, if Roger Randolph is willing to look at the current way that ballots are being put in the mail and delivered, we would be happy to have him consider any changes that would add to the integrity of the system, because also, as David pointed out, if there was something bad going on, it could have benefited either party.
Absolutely.
So, let's look at it. I don't think anything nefarious happened, but, why not make it even more secure if you can?
Let's move forward to 2020. We nibbled on the edges of 2020 a few minutes ago. Let's move forward to that. One of the things we heard in the city elections from the Democratic candidates is they were all talking about climate change. Is this something that we're going to hear more of moving forward into the 2020 cycle, do you think, from Democrats at least?
I believe it is for a few reasons. One, our Department of Defense has labeled climate change as one of the primary security threats facing this nation. And the other thing is, younger folks have taken on this issue, and there are going to be 4 million people turning 18 by Election Day 2020, and they vote, and this is their issue. We will be hearing more about climate change.
What else do you think Democrats are going to put forward as we move into 2020?
Healthcare, income and wealth inequality, the tax code that favors the very wealthy, things like that, equity.
And David, what will we hear from local Republicans and moving all the way up the ticket, up the chain, if you will?
Well, I'll answer that for local Republicans because as county chair, that's my concern. But I want to address your question to Allison about the climate change issue that Mayor-elect Romero laid out on election night in her first interview as mayor-elect. I think, and we think, that it's ludicrous, actually just ludicrous, that the number one issue for a mayor in a medium-sized American city should be climate change. We live in a community that has a law and order problem. It's crime-ridden. Our police are, I think, 400 officers undermanned. And if it wasn't so sad and so dangerous, it would be laughable that she laid out as her number one concern for her administration is climate change. Now for our local situation here in Tucson and Pima County, we concentrate on jobs. We concentrate this concentration from the left on social justice and equality. These are issues from the 60s. We've got we need jobs in this community. We need new employers in this community. We need infrastructure investment in this community. The roads are falling apart. The bridges, the railroad bridges at Grant, or if you look up, are rust-ridden. The infrastructure of Tucson and Pima County is falling apart. It's unsafe in many, many parts of town, and that has now bled into the east side, which has always been the safest part of Tucson. We're going to be fielding candidates that are after economic growth, new business opportunities, new employers, keeping this job situation, which nationally and in Pima County is at the highest levels. Our unemployment rate is at the lowest levels. Employment is at the highest levels in recorded history. And we've got to keep that going. We've got to keep Tucson moving forward economically so people who graduate from the University of Arizona can find a job in Tucson. They can't find jobs here because there's no employers. You get outside Raytheon and the government, University of Arizona, who's going to hire people in this town? And small businesses is the answer, but the codes in Tucson are so unbusiness friendly. They make a person trying to start a small business jump through so many hoops and spend so much money to get a business started. That's the kind of thing that our new mayor should be looking at, and not climate change.
Allison.
I would say Mayor Romero has it right because there is a nexus between the economy and climate change. By the end of this century, if climate change goes unabated, Tucson's climate will be just like Death Valley's. That's an 8-degree Fahrenheit change. And that's the difference between Tucson and Death Valley. I do not see businesses lining up to open in Death Valley. Also, there's a nexus with healthcare and disease and crime, all associated with climate change. You can't put it just in a box, economy in a box, and not look at how climate change would affect that. It runs through every sector of our economy, and water supply is another. Would businesses come here if they don't think they have water? We need to be a place where people want to be in order to attract business.
Let's talk about water. Mayor-elect Romero has said she wants to plant 1 million trees. Where are you going to get the water? It's an absolutely ludicrous statement and a ludicrous plan. Here in the desert, we want to plant 1 million trees and water them. The two just don't go together. But I also want to say something else about climate change on a worldwide level. The headlines last week about the current flood in Venice, the local headline in the Star was worst flooding in Venice in 50 years. And they blame it on climate change. Think about that. That means that 50 years ago it was worse, before there was ever climate change in the news or recorded. So this is cyclical. Whether it's changing or not, it's cyclical. And that a mayor of a mid-sized American town would put worldwide climate change on her agenda as the #1 priority, again, is if it wasn't so tragic, it would be laughable.
But then our Department of Defense also considers it a major security challenge for our nation. Also, I'd like to say planting trees is doable, and by planting trees, native trees, they don't require a lot of water, and they do cause cooling, which reduces people's energy bills, which uses less water. There's a nexus with water and energy.
I think we've now officially begun the 2020 election. We've turned the page on 19. We're on to 2020. Thank you for both of you, for sitting down with us.
It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much.